Hey everyone, it's Phil Wade. How are you? We'll get going in just a minute. We have a lot of people joining on. Is everyone able to hear me, see me coming through loud and clear? Appreciate that. Alrighty, I know I'm saying hello. Hello, everybody. Good to see you here. Thank you so much for attending. Appreciate that. I do ask if everyone would be so kind to to wait till we finish. I'm sure there'll be a fair number of a fair number of questions. So we have a lot of people still joining on. So we'll give it another minute, and then we will get going, and then at the end we will open it up for questions and answers. So just another minute, we'll get started. Um, so hang in there. Probably start about 6:02, 6:03. Oh, thank you so much, Jared. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So looks like most everybody's here. Still getting a few more coming on. So give it another 30 seconds and we'll get rolling. Appreciate everybody taking some time being here out of your busy schedule. So that's awesome. So all right, let me get going. I'll move the slide here. So all right, just in case you're maybe not as familiar, just a little background on kind of, what's happened. Yes, this is being recorded, Shelley. So, yep, absolutely. We'll have this up on the Join Dalton Wade website probably late tomorrow or Thursday. So, a little background. So the Justice Department, has kind of been after NAR for a number of years. At the end of the Trump administration, NAR and the Justice Department signed an agreement. There were some stipulations, nothing nearly as dramatic as what we're about to go through. And we thought everything was good. But then there were some legal suits, primarily one in Missouri. That is the one that ended up actually going to a jury. But prior to that, there is MLS PIN. So MLS PIN got sued. This is actually by the Justice Department, and they agreed. So before there had to be minimum compensation for a buyer's agent, even if it was $1, but something had to go in those MLS fields um, indicating how much the listing agent, the seller, was paying the buyer's agent. Even if it was $1, but it was mandatory, something had to go in there. That that uh, they were sued, they lost, and then kind of the first step was, and you may see this now on some listings where they're offering 0, they're offering 1%, they're offering something very nominal, right? So that's already been in place. And then late September of 2023, Remax and Anytime Realty, which is Caldwell Banker, Century 21, Sotheby's, they agreed to settle, right? So that was kind of the first indication that maybe this was not going to go in the direction everyone thought. And then October 31st of last year, the jury deliberates only for 2 hours, and they rule against NAR, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, and the verdict was huge. It was 1.87 billion. That's with a B. Potential treble damages, so it could have been 5.4 billion. So NAR did say at that time that they were going to fight on. It was wrong. They were going to appeal. But then March 15th comes, and NAR enters into a settlement agreement with the plaintiffs. The settlement agreement is kind of going through the motions now. The settlement agreement is going to be enacted starting August 17th. So that's kind of a key date. Let me just say one thing here, and this is important. So the whole crux of all this is lack of competition, right? And really, I mean, at Dalton Wade, I was speaking with a broker, an agent yesterday. He is coming to Dalton Wade because his brokerage says you have to charge X, right? He's forced to charge 5% or he can't take the listing. So it was things like that. That's just one example of many things that when you added it all up seemed to indicate kind of a lack of competition, right? A lack of competition. So as we get into the settlement, right, and we start to change our practices, remember competition is what this is all about. There are no, like, you're not guaranteed getting a commission. Everything is negotiable. But here's the point. The settlement agreement is actually good, right? It is good. It is going to clean some things up. It is going to make things a lot more transparent for consumers. Overall, it is going to be good, right? But here's the thing. The Justice Department, right, the DOJ, under the Biden administration, reopened, even though they had agreed with NAR, right? There was a settlement. We were done, right? Besides these lawsuits, but they've come back now and they've opened the case again. Here's what the Justice Department wants at the end. Whether they get this or not, we don't know, right? But what they want is the total decoupling of the seller being able to pay anything for that buyer agent. Zero. They want it to be separate, right? Seller pays their commission. If a buyer wants to work with a buyer's agent, they have to pay that. That would be very, very, very disruptive, right? So hopefully that is not going to occur. But what's happening, I guarantee you, once this gets enacted, right, the Justice Department is going to be looking, right? And if in the end they think there is still anti-competitive behavior out there, they may act. And that would really be devastating, I think, to the industry. Unfortunately, a lot of times, people don't really know what we do as real estate agents, right? They think, they've watched too many reality TV shows and, here's this, $75,000 commission. And that's just not realistic. We work very hard. We work very hard for our clients. So continue to do that. Understand that, commissions are negotiable, commissions are competitive, what we're paid, right? And we will be fine. So just a little background on kind of what's happened and what potentially could happen. So we're hoping, right, once the settlement agreement gets enacted, everything, I'm not saying it's business as usual, anything like that, right? But I think my take on it is we will get through this. I don't see commissions going away. I'm sure everybody heard, oh, the 6% commission is dead, right? I mean, none of that is true. It's all hype. It's all noise, right? So again, and we're going to talk a little bit later about, presenting your value, communicating your value, things of that nature. So, all right. So what's going to change? What is going to change? All right. So the first one is the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement. So let me say, I've been getting a lot of inquiries from agents, and why I haven't done this webinar sooner is because we're still in this kind of, I don't want to say limbo period, but the new rules haven't taken effect. There are no new forms, right? We're still operating the way it was, right? And that's fine up until August 17th. That's when things are going to change. But it's a little bit hard, right, for me to even do this webinar because I haven't seen any of the forms, right? I haven't seen the new listing agreement. I haven't seen the new buyer broker agreements, right? So none of that is out there yet. It's coming. But here's one change we know 100% is going to happen. It will be very explicit, right? Very explicit, both on the listing agreement and the buyer broker agreement, that commissions are negotiable. Commissions are not set by state law, right? They are negotiable. And obviously, I mean, not that that's any different, but it's going to be, just much more, black and white, right in the consumer space. They will now know this. They will not really be able to miss it. But as I mentioned, at this time, the forms are not out yet. So we're hoping they're coming soon. They're being reproduced by, the various state board of realtors. So we're waiting. They should be out soon. So those are coming, but we know that one change where they're going to add that language that, commissions are negotiable will certainly be there. All right. Another big one, right? Removal of the co-broker compensation on MLS, right? So no longer will there be fields in MLS that say what you're being offered, right? Whether you're a single agent, transaction broker, non-agent, every state is a little bit different how that data is displayed. That data now is pushed out to Redfin, Zillow, third-party websites. That is all going to end, right? Not going to be there. What does that mean? Well, it means sellers are still able to offer a buyer agent compensation. That is not going away, right? That is still out there. Now they don't have to. They don't have to now. So there's really no change. It may be just a little bit clumsy in terms of now how we have to operate, right? So again, there is a chance that there could be some third-party websites that come out that actually have the co-broke information on them. We may be able to access it that way. We don't know yet. But come August 17th, there will be no more co-broke information found in the MLS. All right. So what are you going to do? So as a buyer's agent, you are going to have to negotiate your commission with that listing agent or with that seller. We do that now, right? If we have a for sale by owner, right? We have to negotiate with them. We have to get a commission agreement. The commission agreement is set up now so that it's with a seller. But again, what you're going to have to get, again, we're going to see how this all transpires, what the National Association of Realtors said, what the state realtor association say. But again, my hunch is that there's going to be a form that you are going to need to get signed by either the listing brokerage or the seller saying what your commission is, right? You may be able to put it in the offer. Right now, we're not supposed to do that. That may change. So a lot of this is still evolving. So again, how are you going to know, right? So you're taking your client out on a tour. You're showing them 7 properties. Are you going to call every single showing and ask them, are they offering commission? You could. There would be nothing wrong with that. Personally, I wouldn't be doing that. What I would be doing is, because obviously your client can only buy one house. Once they decide, hey, I'm ready to make an offer, that's probably when you're going to call and ask, right? And then they may say, yes, we're offering this, or they may say, no, we're not offering anything. You're going to bring that information back, right, to your buyer because you have a buyer broker agreement. We're going to talk more about that on the next slide or the coming slides, right? So you're getting paid, right? You're getting paid by the buyer. What you're going to be telling that buyer is, hey, I'm going to do my darndest to have the seller pay my commission, right? My compensation. So you don't have to, right? So we're going to have to enter into a listing agreement, with the listing brokerages or the seller, right? And then you're going to make sure that, your broker signs it, the other broker signs it. So one of the nice things about, everybody makes fun of like NAR and the MLS and why do we pay these dues? Well, let me tell you one of the benefits, right? One of the benefits is in my entire career as a real estate agent and broker, I've never not been paid ever once. I never even worry about it. We are always paid because if we're not paid, right, then we're going to file a complaint with the board of realtors in our area, and they're going to make sure we get paid, and they may kick that other brokerage out. It doesn't happen like that. You just get paid, right? It happens at closing. You get your commission. So again, that's going to change. There isn't going to be that guarantee. Now, again, once we have that commission agreement signed by the listing brokerage or the seller, those are legally binding agreements. Again, if it's with the listing brokerage, we can file a complaint to make sure they pay us. If it's with a seller, we can take them to court and we can force them to pay us, right? So we want to make sure, right, that we are all, again, think of it working with a FISBO. One time I had an agent, he's still here, he learned the hard way. He learned the hard way, right? He put in the contract, the purchase contract, that the seller was to pay us. Well, it wasn't binding. We couldn't enforce it. These agreements will be enforceable, right? So you're going to always, right, keep in mind, hey, if I'm working with a buyer, how am I going to get paid? And how is that going to be documented, right? And once we get closer and once we have the forms, I will definitely be doing another webinar because then we'll have a little bit more meat to kind of talk about. Now we're still a little bit in the, kind of in the theory stage, so to speak. All right. So this is probably the biggest one of all, right? Buyer broker agreement is now mandatory for all buyers, right? So again, you're going to need to have kind of a buyer broker consultation. Hopefully you're doing that now. You're speaking with your client. We have a nice buyer, presentation up on the Join Dalton Dalton Wade website. You can download that. You can, edit it. It's editable, customizable, right? Have a little meeting right before you start with your client. Maybe you do it via Zoom. Maybe you do it in person, whatever works, right? But then you're going to speak to them and you're going to let them know what you do, how you're going to help them. You are going to be promoting yourself, right? So again, do you think, there's so many things we do. Again, real estate can be tricky. That's why a good buyer's agent is there, is to guide their client through, right? Make sure that septic got inspected or whatever it happens to be. And then there's going to be some mandatory provisions in there, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. So we're going to have, what is the rate of, compensation we are going to receive, right? It's going to be black and white. This is what you're going to be paid, as the buyer's agent, right? It must be objectively ascertainable, not open-ended, meaning like, oh, buyer broker compensation shall be whatever the seller is offering, right? No, it can't be like that. It has to be, we could see a whole bunch of different models pop up. There could be, flat fee models. I will work with you for, $6,000 or $10,000 or, what have you, right? So those, will be become much more, much more common. Now, here's another one that, again, think about this. So, there's going to be a statement that they're requiring that says right in that agreement that if that buyer only agrees to pay you, let's say 2%, right? But then the seller's offering 2.5% or 3% or something more, you're only going to receive the 2%. Now, how that will work with the listing agent, again, not sure, haven't heard too much about that. Let's say they've entered into an agreement where it's say 5% they're receiving, 2.5 for them, 2.5 if it's co-broke. Well, now they're only paying 2. So do they get 3? Don't know. We have to see. That's once the forms come out, there'll be much more, kind of clarity around that. So we will have to see how that goes. Um, again, we talked a little bit about this. It's going to be black and white. Commissions are not set by law; they're fully negotiated, right? So, and then some other things to think about, right? So there's going to be different forms of buyer broker agreements, right? There can be limited service, right, where you're only going to do X, Y, and Z, kind of like a limited service listing. Obviously, you're going to probably get less compensation for that. You may be a transaction broker, you may be a single agent, right? There can be a whole, there can be flat fees, right? But again, I think the takeaway when you're chatting with your buyers is that you are going to work very diligently to have the seller pay your fee. You can't promise them that because you don't know that, right? But that would be the idea. Maybe you go and they want to make an offer on a home that isn't offering any compensation to you, and they have to pay it. Maybe then that's now not the house for them, right? And then I've seen a couple agents have sent me, Zillow was out with what's called a touring agreement, right? Uh, Zillow has those kind of instantaneous where they'll almost set the showing for you if you're, maybe on, Zillow Premier Agent or Zillow Flex. Those to me, when I read it, that does not meet the spirit of what's trying to happen here, right? What we're trying to do, what this is all intended to do, is that if the seller doesn't pay, right, then the buyer does. And I did hear some good news today. The VA, right? Previously, if you were working with a VA buyer, they couldn't pay even a transaction fee. So now it seems they're making some changes. They will be able to pay your commission, right, as buyer's agent. So that's good. But this Zillow touring agreement, again, I think it benefits Zillow, right? Because then it's easy to get somebody to sign up, right? Because it's as watered down as you possibly can get. But does it really kind of meet the intent of what's trying to be done here? And again, like I was talking to an agent, she originally was licensed in Georgia. And then, she's been practicing in Florida now a number of years. When she came to Florida, she was shocked. In Georgia, you don't take somebody out without a buyer broker agreement. It just doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Right here in Florida, we do that. It's kind of, customary. But again, I mean, I get calls, procuring clause, you know, this person jilted me. All that's going away, right? Because you are going to get them to sign something prior to working with them, right? It's all going to be laid out, which is much, much more transparent. All right, just a little bit on fair housing. So again, this is kind of a seller consideration. Again, like I read this and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Because they want us to negotiate, but here's the thing. Here's where fair housing could possibly, rear its ugly head. So you have a seller, right? And they start like, oh, let's offer this buyer, 2% or 2.5%, but let's offer this buyer's agent, because of their client or who they are, something different. That could be problematic, right? Again, can't be treating people differently, right? We're very focused on, those protected classes of folks, race, religion, sexual orientation, national origin, all those things, right? So again, if you're working with a seller and you're offering, compensation to that buyer broker, it's got to be across the board. It's got to be the same for everybody. If it is the same for everybody, you have nothing to worry about. But when they start saying, oh, I only want to offer them this because of that, that could be problematic. So be aware of that. All right, so let's talk about some key dates going forward. I mean, again, originally this was supposed to roll out, meaning the settlement agreement. I believe it was, they said the middle of July. It then got pushed back to August 17th. I've heard some MLSs are going to start deleting the data around August 14th. So, but between August 14th and August 17th, all that information, all that buyer broker compensation is gone from the MLS, right? And then, June 30th or hopefully sooner or around there, we should start to see the new forms. Once we have the forms, I think, we'll certainly do another webinar very close right after that, because there'll be a lot more to talk about. We'll actually have some concrete things that we can, excuse me, sort of stick our teeth into, right? And we can actually, it's not just, oh, we're thinking it's going to be like this. No, this is what it is. These are the forms that we are going to be working with. All right. So again, a couple of things. I got a spelling spelling error here, but all right. So again, the key thing, right? The takeaway on all this, and you should already be doing this, right? Already doing this is um, presenting your value, right? Presenting your value. Again, who I think this hurts are those flim flam, I only care about the commission. There are agents out there, and we all know them, right? They want to do the least amount of work to get that commission. Those people are going to go away, because now I'm not saying you're going to have to do more, but you're certainly going to have to communicate exactly what you're going to do, exactly what your value proposition is, how you are going to help both sellers and buyers, right? In a very explicit way. Talk a little bit about seller credit or seller concession. So again, it is possible, right? So you may be able to, rather than get a commission agreement, right, to make sure you're paid as buyer's agent, you may be able to get the buyer to pay you through that seller credit or that seller concession. Now, again, you cannot write it up in the offer, seller to pay $10,000, towards buyers, brokers, commission. Can't do that. It has to be general, like it is now. Seller to pay $10,000 for buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and non-allowables, right? As long as it's written generally like that, some of that credit or all that credit can actually go towards paying your commission. All right. And I would strongly suggest, if you're not already doing this, if you're still out there working with buyers without an agreement, this is coming. It's coming soon. So, it's not like it's not coming or it might be coming. No, this is definitely going to be happening come, August 17th. Every buyer you work with, you need an agreement. It could be a showing agreement just for one property. It could be of short duration. I don't know if she's here tonight, but Carla mentioned, oh, her strategy, she's just going to do it, 2 weeks, 2 week agreement. Test me out, try me out, see how you like working with me, right? And then the goal would be, hey, they're going to love her, and she knows that in advance. And then, when the 2 weeks are over, she's going to get something longer term, right? And then this is another one that I'm just kind of in the back of my mind. Who's going to come out on top? Everybody's thinking like the buyer's agent is at a disadvantage. I don't know. I really don't know, and I'll tell you why. So when I was an agent, a lot of my business was from FSBOs, right? For sale by owners. And what they always said to me, bring me a buyer, they didn't want to list with me. Eventually I might get them as a listing, but they would always say, bring me a buyer, right? Maybe the listing agents are the one that are going to lose. Maybe people will list, through these flat fee services. Who knows how this is going to transpire, right? But the takeaway on both sides, whether you're going to, on a listing side or if you're working with a buyer, you really have to communicate your value. You've got to do that formally. Just like when you go on a listing presentation, you take them through what you're going to do, how you're going to work together. then you give them the listing agreement and they sign it, hopefully, right? Same thing now. It's going to be no different when you work with a buyer. It's going to be like you're on a present, you're going to give them a presentation of what you do, how you're going to help them, right? Again, just again, talking about those flim flam, agents, like there are agents, like I never did this. I went to every home inspection my buyer ever had, 100% of the time, all the time. And then when I heard like, oh, agents don't even go to home inspections, it was shocking to me, but what some do because again, I use the L word, they're lazy. They don't want to do any work to get that money. That's going away. So what you really want to be doing is presenting, hey, this is what I do. I'm going to show you, right? I'm going to show you homes. I'm going to negotiate hard for you. I'm going to be there at that home inspection to make sure, right? I'm not a home inspector, but to make sure we understand if we do have to go back, to the seller, I'm going to make sure everything is right, all the things, that we do. So we have to see. There's going to be some changes. We know that. But, exactly kind of how this rolls out, it may be no big deal at the end of the day. Few years back, there was TRIN, right? That was some lending, right? And everybody was afraid, oh, this is going to be a disaster, right? It's going to take 2 months now to get something closed. And then it was like no big deal. So we have to kind of see, what's going to happen. So let me do this. Let me throw it out to some question and answers. Let's see. Hey, Nikki, I'll start with yours. One of the real estate attorneys in my area said that the buyer broker can be on a house. Yep, absolutely. Right. So you could have it. That would be more of a showing agreement, right? You're just showing them that home, right? And that's all they're committed to you for. Or maybe you have a 1 day agreement, right? You're taking them out that 1 day, right? It's a little bit less less aggressive than Carla's with, 14 days, right? In terms of, she's signing him up for 14 days, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, again, that is certainly possible. So let's see, I'm starting here. So if you've already typed in a question, maybe put it in again. You could be so kind, because I'm starting with Nikki. So let's see, hold on here. All right, Shauna says, can we word our buyer agreement to a minimum percentage offset by the mystery number being offered by the seller so we can make a fair commission but utilize the full amount? Unfortunately, no, Shauna. How are you? No. So basically, if all you got that buyer to agree to was to pay you 2%, and then in the end, right, the seller's offering 2.5 or 3%, unfortunately, you're only going to be compensated 2%. Right. So again, what you want to do, I mean, is try to get something that you're happy with, 2.5, 3%, whatever it is, a flat fee. Right. And again, you're going to communicate to your seller that to your buyer that you're going to negotiate and try to get the seller to to compensate you so that they don't have to pay. All right, let's see what else we have here. um, Team Richardson says, long buyer broker agreement is part of our offer, we are good. No, absolutely not. How you doing, Christina? Absolutely not. No, you have to have that buyer broker agreement when you show them the property. Now, how am I going to police that as the broker? Here's what I'm going to look for: that you have the buyer broker agreement in the file, right? When you put in the offer, but you really need that. Again, you know, I don't know what type of, what MLS is going to do, how they're going to do this. Um, kind of any of that. But the takeaway is you need that signed when, and again, it can be, just for one property, could be for 1 day, could be for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months. It's all to be negotiated. Let me just pop back up here. Um, Let me open this up so a little better read on it. Yeah, Carlisle says trying to fix something that wasn't broken in the first place. I definitely agree with that. I mean, I don't again, they're not out in the field like we are, but I do believe that in certain areas there might have been some things that were kind of anti-competitive. When you add, you couldn't use the lockbox system if you're not part of NAR. Certain MLSs allowed agents to sort the listings by commission paid, right? I had an agent, another broker, calling me complaining about one of the agents, and she was only offering 1%, and then the agent says, I don't work for free. No, that is again, that's why you need the buyer broker agreement, right? If you have the buyer broker agreement, the buyer is going to pay you, right? But you are trying to get, in the end, the seller to compensate you. Michelle says, how will buyer broker agreement work for open houses? Again, it's a great question. I don't think, I mean, you're not showing them a home, right? They're just coming to the home. But if you end up picking up a buyer, like I was, I was a master at, getting clients out of open houses. I use the F word, right? F word, free leads, free clients right off of your open houses. Now, again, if you say to them, hey, let's go out and look at, you hit it off with them, you bonded, let's go look at some homes. Would you like to do that? Right? Before you do that, you're going to sit down with them, maybe via Zoom, in person, and you're going to take them through all the things you're going to do to help them. And you're going to get them to sign that buyer broker agreement. All right, so let's see. So Patty, great question. Finding out what the commissions prior to showing the property makes sense because most buyers that have a signed buyer rep at a certain percentage will want to know ahead of showing whether they will have to contribute anything. That's possible. I mean, again, I don't know personally. I mean, how I would do it is again more once because again, like you take somebody out, right? You show them 7 houses, they don't put an offer in on any of them. I would really focus once they're ready to pull the trigger. I'm going to find out. And then again, they have to decide maybe that isn't the house for them. Hey, Marion. Yeah, I mean, there could be hourly. I mean, there can be, any type of, structure that you know, compensate you. I mean, I don't know if it's going to get down to hourly agreements, but definitely think there could certainly be, fixed rate, right? I charge $6,000. I mean, I did that before, right? Again, it's just negotiating, right? Um, there was giving part of my commission back. Right here, it won't be that because really, at the end of the day, all you're able to receive is the minimum, right? If you have on that, if you're only getting $2,500 from that buyer, and you're showing them, a $700,000 home, and they're offering 3%, you are getting $2,500. You are getting the less of whatever it is on that buyer broker agreement versus whatever the selling is willing to compensate you. Let's see, can we have our client sign a new form if they are paying more or less commissions? Um, you're going to have to expand on that, Shelley. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. So kind of clarify that. I'll get back to that. If in the MLS the compensation is 2%, is that list? Okay, Hilda. So there is going to be there is no more commissions. Think of it like this: there is no more commission data in the MLS. It is all going to be, it's all gone come August 17th. It is not going to be there anymore, right? So again, you're going to have to negotiate. There will definitely be more negotiation, right? You will have to get better, at negotiating. That's what we do. You're going to want to hone that skill. Karen says, so August 17th is when, right? So August 17th, unless there's some change to that date, seems pretty firm right now. You will, if you're working with a buyer, right? You are going to need that buyer broker agreement. signed by them. All right, let's see. Can we word our buyer agreement to minimum percentage offset by, all right, we answered that. Right. So, again, in some states, looks like Connecticut, Tina is mentioning, right? Always had the buyer agent contract. Again, like, Florida's this maybe kind of weird animal where agents are willing to take people out without I mean, I know agents definitely, they will not take someone out without it, right? So for them, like, what's the big deal? There's nothing new, right? So, all right, Sheila, how are you? I know some agents that charge 6%, but they take 4 for them and 2% for the buyer. Probably they'll need, yeah. I mean, again, those are. I mean, you wonder how agents get their clients to sign that. I think what happens is they just stick the thing in front of the client. The client doesn't read it, and they sign off on that. So, that potentially is going to change. Maybe, not sure. Um, let's see. Um, yeah, I mean, let's see. It's difficult for me on the questions here. Hold on. Diego, where can we find out more about the VA announcement allowing buyer fees? I would say probably Google it. Somebody sent it to me early this morning. So I know it's out there. Seems like it's going to be enacted. So that's a good thing. Um, hey, Ronnie, yeah, listing agents are going to be hammered with phone calls all day long. Again, that there may. So one of the things they talk about is a loophole. And the loophole is that data can still be published. That buyer agent commission data can still be out there. It's just prohibited that it's in the MLS, right? So again, you have to kind of see how that transpires. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, again, Andrea, I mean, I think, what you're going to try to communicate to that buyer, right, is that, you're going to work your darndest, your hardest, to get, um, to get the seller to pay that, right? That's kind of the message, right? And if they don't, then maybe that's not the house for your client, right? All right, Sharon's asking maybe the transaction fee will disappear. So let me just comment on that. So again, there's a lot of confusion around that. And again, we may have some agents, that are in MLSs that don't have these, but there are many MLSs or many listings where you might see the buyer agent offered 2.5% minus 395, right? Fairly common. We see that. There is no such thing as a transaction fee. Let me say that again. There is no such thing as a transaction fee. All they are doing is reducing your commission and increasing their commission. It's a reduction in the commission. I had an agent call me from a different brokerage, right? He's complaining, oh, you guys are charging junk fees. He didn't know what he's talking about. They're not junk fees. They're a reduction in the commission. Have your broker call me. He didn't call because there was nothing to say. Georgette says she can't wait for this new law to be in effect. I mean, I think, again, good agents, strong agents, agents that are able to negotiate well, agents that are able to present their value. I think they're going to do great. It's those kind of, lesser agents that, ultimately might, find it harder here. All right. Hey, Shannon, transaction fees will disappear. They can charge them now. They won't be able to charge agents at all. You're probably right. I mean, it's going to be hard, when, I mean, who knows? You might be right. But again, you might hear, oh, we're offering 2.5% minus 395. Again, those transaction fees, they're a reduction in the commission. That's all it is. There is no such thing as an MLS fee. That is what people call them. You are 100% correct. All right, Laura says lead commission will probably have to change as well because we may not be able to receive as much per sale as in the past. I meant lead referral amounts. I mean, hard to say, I mean, again, we have Opcity, Zillow, different, I mean, possibly, I mean, it's hard to know, again, again, as I've said a couple times, it's difficult. We don't have all the information. We're still in this kind of, purgatory stage, right? Where we're not, we know it's coming, but we're not in it, right? Things will get clear, I think, very, very quickly. All right, let's see. Raza says, how are you, Raza? In most cases, buyer barely purchase. They are always looking for closing costs and down payment. How are they going to pay our commission? We must be realistic. Great question. So I think again, now again, what I said at the beginning, what would be devastating is if the seller is prohibited legally from paying the buyer's agent commission. That is not happening here. That is not happening here, right? We are in what I consider, I wouldn't, it's not like the COVID market, I think where sellers were emboldened, like, what do I need to pay a buyer's agent for? I can sell this without, right? That isn't what's happening out there now, right? That is not out. So again, what you got to get good at is explaining your value, right? Now, and again, it's not like you, Raza, are going to be the only person requiring that buyer broker agreement. Everybody is going to be. Hey, Jody, how are you? Good to see you. Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, again, I think if they're, coming into an open house, I'll check on this. I don't think you're going to have anything signed. But if you're going to take them out, you meet them, you connect with them, you're now becoming their agent, and you're going to take them out and begin to show them other homes, you would definitely need the buyer broker agreement signed at that point. Carla, you're completely right. Well, I think it's ignorance of the public, but I also think there are some, I'll use that flim flam word again. There are some bad agents out there that really have no value. And when that happens, people say, like, what happened? Right. So I think those people are going to be the ones that ultimately struggle here, where they're really unable to kind of provide, what their value is. All right, let's see. Um, I'm wondering, Tony, how are you, Tony? Tony says, I'm wondering how it will work if I have a listing agreement and then we get the buyer. How do we handle that? No differently than you are now, right? I mean, again, if you think of the listing agreement, so the whole thing is that the seller pays the listing brokerage and then the listing brokerage pays the co-bro, right? But because it kind of all gets netted, sometimes it doesn't appear that way, right? So again, if everybody know what like variable rate commission is. So variable rate commission, you'll see that, in the MLS. So that means if there's a buyer's agent, the commission is 6%, let's just say. But variable rate commission might mean, hey, if the listing agent procures the buyer, that commission is something less, right? So that's telling the buyer's agent, hey, right, I have to be more competitive. I have to offer more, right? So again, that's not going to change. Whatever it says, they're paying Dalton Wade. That's what you're going to receive if you're the listing agent. Just like now, you get both sides, right? Potentially, if you have the buyer, no change there. All right, believe I answered, Nikki's question, in terms of, you know, um, can show them one property, multiple properties. All right, let's see. Yeah, I mean, again, so I love Marion, right? As a buyer's agent, I would offer, hourly, flat, house specific, limited service, extensive service, right? Kind of a smorgasbord. That's the whole thing, right? There is competition. That's what America is. I would see like agents sometimes, oh, you're destroying the business because you're charging this. No, you don't understand antitrust, right? So again, it is competitive, it is negotiable. What do we do about current listings and the compensation now? Nothing, nothing. I mean, nothing. There's no need to change. How you doing, Leslie? Right. So no need to change because it's already memorialized. So, when that buyer agent is ready to, make an offer, you're probably going to get a call and ask about how much compensation you're going to be able you're offering because they're not going to be able to see it on the MLS. So again, nothing is changing in terms of the, listing agreements that are already in effect, no change. All that will be changing is now you're going to get that phone call as the listing agent. All right, let's see. Yeah, again, Andrew's mentioning, difficult for first time buyers, but again, what you got to communicate to them is that, you know, every agent's going to require this, not just you, right? You're not working in a vacuum. This is across the board, right? And you're going to do your darndest to get the seller to pay your compensation. Hey, Laura, will anything pertain to rentals in the MLS? That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I will definitely get back to you on that. I believe, I'm not sure. I've not heard this, you know, especially in certain, certain parts of Florida, other parts, right? You sometimes, the leasing agent and the agent that brings the tenant, they split the commission often. Um, so again, I'm not sure if that data is going away as well, but I will find out. I talked about, Christina's question about nope. Can't really be part of the offer. You need that buyer broker agreement signed, right when you start working with them. And you want to do that. Like, here's the thing why you want that buyer broker agreement is because if you do show them a house and they aren't offering any compensation, how are you going to get paid? How are you going to get paid? All right. As listing agent, you would think you would want to structure the commission as they are currently by enticing buyers agent. Absolutely. Every listing agent I have spoken to, and I, you know, maybe talked to, I don't know, 15, 18. I was at an event. I mean, every one of them, business as usual, business as usual, right? Meaning they are going to be offering buyer agent commission. Like, why wouldn't you? The only people I worry about are again those kind of flim flam, unscrupulous agents where, hey, they signed somebody up for 5%, right? A seller, and now they're not offering any commission to the buyer's agent. I hate those people. Don't do that. We will have Leo's asking about. We will have the recording up on the website sometime tomorrow, Thursday at the latest. Um, hey, Troy, nope, your sellers are not going to need to sign anything new. We touched upon that. Could you have a 1 year agreement for out of state buyers that take time? Absolutely. It's all, hey, Melanie, it's all negotiable. Everything is negotiable, right? If you can get somebody signed on to you for a year, go get them, right? I mean, it's negotiation. That's what we're good at, right? I mean, that's what we do. Now we have to do a little more of it. Do we get paid for the 2 week agreement? Only if they buy something within that 2 weeks. If that 2 weeks is expires, right? It ends, has an end date, just like a listing, can expire. Well, your buyer broker agreement can expire. Then you're going to have to get a new one, or you're not working with them anymore, right? So, I mean, because you got to have that buyer broker agreement in effect at all times. Hey, Steve, great question. So, I mean, again, we think it's 50-50, but I can tell you, and I've seen it, a lot of times it's not. The only time you find out as the or as the buyer's agent is at settlement. When you see the listing agent got 12 grand and you got 8 grand, right? They got more, right? But it is possible, right, that, you know, again, sellers want buyers. That's what they need. They need somebody to buy their home, especially now. So yeah, you could see, it could go any way. It's hard to know. We're not in it yet. I think Shelley is asking, so I think she's asking about, so again, we receive as the buyer's agent the less of, right, what we agree to and then what they're offering. So if we only agree to work with them and our compensation is 1%, 1.5%, right? But maybe you're showing somebody, $1 million property and 1.5% is pretty darn nice. That's where I think the pressure will be is really on the high end. When a buyer, because I mean, is it more work to show a $2 million home than a $300,000 home? Probably less work, quite honestly, right? So I think those maybe is where you'll see some pressure on commissions in that very high end, but not, don't know for sure. Hey, Michael. So, yep, I think we touched upon this. So, um, you are going to, your listing agreement is good. Nothing to worry about that. Do you think the language that reads the greater of say 2% or 7,000? Nope, that won't be acceptable. That won't be acceptable, unfortunately, Mark. So it's got to be, it can be 2% or 7,000, but it can't be both. It can't be this or that, right? It has to be it's just black and white what you're earning as the buyer's agent, period. And then if what they're offering is more than that, then that's all you get. Absolutely. Trust me. I mean, people struggle, right? They need closing costs. But again, the message, right, to those folks is you are going to work very hard, in order, because again, what you're doing first is you're stressing your value, right? You're explaining to them why they are naive if they are going this alone or if they're working with the listing agents. I've seen the listing agents take the buyers to the cleaners a few times, more than a few, meaning they don't care about that buyer. That buyer needs to be represented. You got to explain that to them and then, how you're going to help them. And then in the end, right, you're going to try it as hard as you possibly can to get the seller to pay your commission. Thank God that that's still allowed. That would have been terrible. That would have been a real game changer. This settlement agreement, there's some loopholes, the fact that commission data can be on other sites, right? We will work through this, trust me. Hey, Laura, I think ideally what you would want to have is you would want to have a buyer broker agreement that expires after you have put in the offer. Then I think you're safe. Yeah, you can do more than one. Absolutely. Hey, Janet, absolutely. You can do more than one. You can have one for that first showing. And then when they fall in love with you and they know you're the rock star agent that you are, right? They're going to sign on for, longer, right? You got to get to know people, right? So again, I think where it'll be harder, let's be realistic. So if you have a referral and you ask them to sign it, meaning a past client refers you to a buyer, or maybe you worked with that family before and it's a son or daughter, right? You're not gonna have much problem getting them to sign. Trust me on that. I think where it will be harder is when you've met somebody online, maybe it's the first time, you got to be good. You got to explain to them, how you're going to help them and what you're going to do. And you got to really formalize that. But again, it's not like you're doing this in a vacuum, meaning you're the only one. Like, oh, they can go work with this agent and they don't have to sign anything. That's not how this is supposed to work. Patrick asks, with prices of homes being so high, how can we expect, right? Well, I think again, the takeaway and what I truly believe will happen is the sellers will still pay. There will be a few, and again, I go back to that FSBO example where the FSBO will say, "Bring me a buyer." That's what sellers want. They want buyers, right? So they're still going to pay. That's what you got to communicate, ultimately to your buyers, right? So I think we've touched upon this, Leslie, right? No change there. Lorianne, how are you? That is right. This is what Lorianne said. This is no different than what we should have been doing all along. You're awesome. I mean, that I couldn't say it better. That is so true. All right. Carlos says, so to be clear, the buyer determines my commission, not the seller. Not necessarily. Again, the idea being is that you're going to have an agreement with the buyer, whatever you negotiate there. If the seller is offering less, right? Let's just use 3%. You sign somebody up for 3%, right? A buyer, that's what they've agreed to pay us. And the seller is only offering 2.5%. That 0.5% has to come from the buyer, right? If you want to enforce that and charge them that legally, we can, right? If the buyer has agreed to pay 3%, but the seller is only offering 2.5 or 2%, you get the lesser amount. You get the lesser amount is kind of how that works. So again, if the seller is offering, compensation, you get and again, you've signed your buyer up for 2%, right? They're only paying 2%, but then the seller's offering 2.5%, you're only getting 2%. I've got to get back to everyone on good question, Tanner, on rentals, and kind of how that's going to work. I haven't really heard much on that. Joanna says, can we as listing agents just offer a part of our commission to the buyer's agent? Yeah, I mean, again, that's kind of what we do now, right? Think about it. Like, again, you know, I mean, it's they don't make this easy. They really don't. I had an agent. This is an interesting story. The in the MLS, it was really bizarre. It said single agent $1,500, um, non agent $1,000, transaction broker 4.5%. And the Dalton Wade agent, he's a transaction broker. He thinks he should get paid 4.5%. The agent doesn't understand it, like what numbers he's putting in there, right? And then I call the broker, and the broker doesn't even get it. He doesn't even understand like what the offer of compensation, right? The seller pays the listing brokerage, and then the listing brokerage offers compensation to a buyer's agent. So that is not going to change. That is not changing. So yeah, I mean, again, but your seller, Joanna, has to agree to that. They're paying 5% in total, and then you're offering 2.5%, right? You're splitting it, right? That all has to be documented in the listing agreement. Great question, Denise. So Denise is asking, if you have a buyer agreement, show a home to your buyer, and then your buyer goes directly through the list agent. How are you going to know, and how are you going to enforce your contract? Okay, so here's the thing. So again, hey, that buyer kind of disappeared on you, and maybe you showed him a home. I had we were the listing brokerage, and again, here's what happened in this case. The listing agent, a Dalton Wade agent, he cancels unconditionally, cancels the listing agreement. The buyer then goes directly to the seller. The buyer's agent is so pissed, so mad, right? And he's even written a nasty letter to the seller, right? So again, you can find out. So one of the things that I'm hoping they change, right? I'm hoping they change. The buyer broker agreement now has no teeth. No teeth. Because if you have to go sue, right? If you have to go sue that buyer to collect the commission, you're going to spend more money in attorney's fees than the commission. But what I hope they do, and if they don't, I'm going to do it. We're going to insert a provision just like that's in the purchase contract, right? If it has to go to court, the losing party pays the other party's attorney's fees and court costs. That's what needs to be in there. Hopefully, the realtor associations put that in. And if they don't, we're going to put it in ourselves. All right, let's see. What do you think of a referral agreement for a specific property listing agent? So if that buyer buys, hey Glenda, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't, I mean, again, I mean, here's a situation um, where the listing agent stole the Dalton Wade agent's client. There are dirty agents out there. Like again, people, you know, this guy, again, she showed him the property, she put an offer in, didn't come together. For what, sometimes buyers don't really know like the intricacies of all this. So the buyers reach out to um, the listing agent directly and he sells them the property. We ended up getting a referral fee because we were going to take him, to the board for procuring costs. He knew that was her client, but he doesn't care. He's a dirtball. That's how I think of those people. Like, just, yeah. I mean, again, what he should have said, and I know he didn't say this, was, hey, you should really work with your client. You need to go, I mean, you really need to go back and, talk to your agent. But they don't do that. They just step on the agent and they take advantage. So, I mean, again, we got a referral fee. You can get a referral fee, but I really don't think that that's kind of how you want to be rolling here. I really think you want to sit down, educate that buyer, have, show them your reviews, maybe get them in touch with past clients, right? And then sign them up. What if a buyer absolutely refuses to sign a buyer? Then you can't work with them. You can't work with them, and then really no agent should be working with them. Then they're strictly on their own. There are people out there, right? There are people out there. Why do consumers call the listing agent? They think they get a better deal. That's why. Again, lack of education of the public. They don't get a better deal. The deal is already set up in the listing agreement. And if there's no like variable rate commission, now again, it's dumb. That buyer is dumb. And the agent that was working with them didn't do a good job explaining to them how it works. They're not saving money. Now they don't have anybody representing them. Because every single time we talk about transaction broker, you're a transaction broker, you have both sides of the deal, right? You're supposed to be neutral. That's what you're supposed to do. But does that happen? No. That listing agent's allegiance is to that seller. That's his client, not the buyer. Explain that to them. Explain that to the buyer. I've seen buyers get abused by listing agents a few times, more than a few. Again, education, right? Knowledge. That's what we got to do. All right, let's see. Denise, is it okay if we inform the sellers that is in their absolutely, absolutely, 100%, 110%, right? That's exactly what we're supposed to do. And then again, if they say no, I don't want to do that, then that's their decision. Education, educating, like, why wouldn't they want to do that? Right? Here's the thing about commissions, and as I've mentioned a few times, and last time I'm going to mention it, but I did a lot with FISBOs, right? And they all say the same thing. They all focus on the commission. They focus on the commission. But the seller, what they really need to focus on is how much money I get at closing. or what the buyer needs to focus on is how much did I pay, right? So if you're a rock star negotiator and you can save that buyer $7,500 because of your negotiating skills, why wouldn't they use you, right? Again, sometimes it all kind of happens after the fact and it's difficult to know, but absolutely, you want to, I mean, especially in the environment we're in now, there aren't as many buyers, inventories are higher. So again, I mean, I believe 100% that, a seller is wise to compensate buyers agents to bring their clients, build it into the price. If the price isn't high enough, you don't accept the offer. Oh yeah, John, you're complete. I mean, I think, Carlisle mentioned it. We had a pretty fluid system that seemed to work well. And then you get some, but it goes back to NAR. NAR did things that when you add them all up, when you look at it, um, kind of, oh, if you're not part of NAR, you can't use the lockbox system. Agents saying, if I'm a buyer's agent, oh, my services are free, right? MLSs that allowed listings to be sorted by which commissions paid the most. Those are all anti-consumer, anti-competitive, and it's presented in a way NAR got their clock cleaned. They got beat up badly, and unfortunately, we're paying the price. But it's not as bad as it could have been, right? I've said this a few times. What would have been terrible is if they said, nope, sellers can't pay the buyer's agent anything. That's not what's happening here. It's not what's happening here at all. All right. Hey, Carol, how are you? Carol just joined Dalton Wade today. Glad you're here. How about buyer? Agree 2% and sell. Which one is considered bake or take? Um, Again, it's all what's in the listing agreement, right? The listing agreement is going to say, hey, the listing brokerage is going to get X, and then they're paying Y to the buyer's agent, or they're getting X and they're not paying anything. That is their right. That is their right. Hey, Abigail. No, I mean you don't have to redo it. I mean, I think the agreement now is fine. The new ones may have a little bit more teeth. Hopefully that's going to be the case really around, collecting, right? So but I don't think if you've already using a buyer broker agreement, hats off to you. That's awesome. So I don't think much, has to change there. Hold on here. I've kind of lost my place. Let's see how we get paid commission for new home sales. Well, again, we don't know. Hey, Nora. Hopefully, there's no change. I mean, that is something I thought about. Again, I don't. I mean, it's hard to know. I think in this environment, the builders will continue to pay compensation to the buyer's agent. I did see when, again, I kind of call it the COVID period when things were like crazy hot out there. Lennar kind of lowered their commission to 1%. If you did a second deal, I think it was 2%, something like that. That all went away. So again, they need us. They want us to bring our buyers by. Hey Eddie, how are you? Let's see. Can we sign a buyer's agreement for 3% and give a rebate if it is less? Um, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Or don't even have a rebate and just say, hey, amend the agreement to whatever they're offering. But yeah, you can definitely, it's the other side. It's when, the buyer has agreed to pay more and then they're only offering less, right? Then, we get less, unfortunately. I think we touched upon this. No, we don't need a, separate buyer broker agreement each time. I mean, again, if you only have it for, a specific property, we do. Angela's, when the commission is not an MLS, how we know what the seller's paying? Well, we have to ask, we have to find out. Again, I mean, there's two ways of doing this. One way is every single listing you're going to call and you're going to ask, or you're just going to ask once you're ready to put an offer in. But here's the thing. So again, we are, if somebody is offering zero, right? If somebody is offering zero, they're not offering to compensate you as buyer's agent. You cannot discriminate against that property. You cannot skip over that property. Why? Why would you? Your buyer has agreed to pay you. Those are some of the things that happen. That's why they changed the rules. Agents were working for themselves, not for their clients. Oh, they're only, did I ever do this? Yeah, I probably did. They're only offering 1.5 or 2%. Unless if my buyer specifically asked me to show them that property, I definitely would. But I'm not adding that one to the tour, right? Why would I? Well, now I would because the buyer's going to make up the difference. That's a good question, Andrea. What happens if the buyer agreement ends? Then the buyer purchases the home. You show them. I mean, I'm imagining there'll be some type of provision. That's why we're still like kind of, we're handicapped a bit here, right? We don't have the forms. So I mean, I would assume just like in a listing agreement, it says, hey, I'm protected for 45 days, 60 days. It's gonna say the same thing in the buyer agreement, but we have to see. Uh, hey, Ivan, what about commercial commission? No, no change there. Again, this will become more like commercial, right? Oftentimes, sometimes the seller does pay, sometimes they don't, right? If you're working with somebody purchasing a commercial property, right, you got to get a commission agreement from them to make sure you're going to get paid. It's going to become very similar to that. Hey, Roy. So no, no, we talked about this. No, no effect. No effect. Any listing agreements in place, continue on. So nothing there. Let's see what else. We'll go a few more minutes here. Hey, Patty, that's a good point. You might be right. I mean, again, they may want to know prior. I mean, that will make for more work. I mean, again, we have to kind of see. Maybe they're going to want to know before you show them the house. We don't know. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely call and then right within the offer. Again, I think all this is going to get flushed out when they have the forms, right? You're going to have some type of commission agreement that is going to more than likely, become part of, nothing, so again, that's going to have to be part of the offer, where it's agreed what you're getting paid. Adam's putting a plug in for Dalton Wade. I joined Dalton Wade because my last broker wouldn't let me negotiate commissions. I mean, that's the thing. That's again one of the things like that gets us in trouble. There's a certain area in Florida I know it is controlled by 3 brokerages. And if all those brokerages tell their agents you have to charge 6% or you can't take the listing, those are the things that got in trouble. So true, Adam, nothing was broken at Dalton Wade. I wouldn't change any of this. I'm not sure that this in the end is better, right? But we're being forced. We are being forced. Again, as I said, NAR, I knew we were in trouble when I saw they had one of these like, Beverly Hills realtors on, and he was on CNBC and he was debating the plaintiff's attorney, Mr. Ketchum, and the realtors, this was their position. Well, when you buy a house, it's free, but when you sell a house, you pay double. That was their argument. I'm like, oh my God, this is not going well. And they lost. They lost. All right, we touched upon that one. Heidi, you have to get a new signed agreement. Nope, nope, we don't. Nope. Hey, Lana, nope, we don't need to get any new signed agreements. Nope, if we have agreements in place, they should be able to continue on. We can do rebates for buyer's agreement. There's no change there, Ed. Same procedure. Everything needs to be disclosed to all parties. Who are all parties? The lender, the title company, the buyer, and the seller. The best way to disclose a rebate is right on the settlement statement. So no change there. Let's see. Uh, Hey, Tia, has there been any discussion with regards to the limits for buyer broke, for time limits? Nope. I mean, not really. Again, whatever you can negotiate. I mean, someone had mentioned, out of state buyers that sometimes take longer to buy, getting the sign on for a year. It's all negotiable, right? I mean, you can sign somebody up just to show them a property. You can sign them up for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year. It's all what you negotiate. I think this is fantastic. Put it out there in 2000. Our commission on land was 10%, homes 8. Now we have the opportunity to bring, hey, Heather, that may be possible. You have to see again, it's all about negotiating, right? You know, it's going to state right on the forms, everything is negotiable. So let's see, Sheehan Static buyers of United States two, no more bonuses either. Yep, that is sad. Absolutely. I mean, that's how it's going to work. I mean, let's see, can the co-op fee be stated in the agents? Nope, that is nope, nope, none of that can be there. Nope, can't be in the realtor remarks, can't be anywhere in the MLS. Again, there is the possibility of it being somewhere else. Hello, Richard, how are you? Will this will this eliminate several buyers that don't have the extra funds? Again, I think we've touched upon this. No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think again, it's all about explaining, communicating, letting them know that your end goal, is to get the seller to pay either through a concession or just to pay outright. Again, I from all the listing agents I've spoken to, they're all going to be encouraging their clients to still offer compensation. Why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? They want to sell that house, right? And now if they're not offering anything, they've reduced, the number of buyers that potentially can buy it. All right, a few more questions. Let's see. Um, are we telling the buyers up front they have to pay our commission? We are not. That's a good question. I mean, upfront, we have to have that buyer broker agreement signed before we show them any homes. But again, I've said this a few times. You're gonna communicate to them that you're gonna try to get the seller to pay that. That is still legal. That is still allowable. If the seller isn't paying it, then maybe that's not the house for them. Hey, Jackson. So again, if the seller is offering less than what you've signed on with the buyer, you can collect the difference from the buyer. Excuse me, let me take that back. If you've signed on with a buyer for more, right? And the seller is paying less. You can only collect what the seller is willing to pay. You can't get it from both sides. All right, let's see. Pedro says, "Hey, Phil, wouldn't you say this will avoid cheating buyers? Because now I don't know if I would call them cheating, Pedro, but that is a good word. So yeah, I mean, again, like if everybody adheres to this, there will be no buyers working unrepresented. It will all go away, right? It will all go away. All right. So if the seller is not offering anything, then you can collect the 3%. So Anderson, just to confirm, would we be able to put in the buyer broker agreement in the event the seller does not pay commission of 3% of purchase price, buyer agrees to pay? That's what it will state. Now, the problem is if the seller is only offering 2%, then that's all you're going to get is 2%. You can't then charge the buyer more, which is unfortunate. I don't know why they did that, but there has to be some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. Let's see here, a couple more. Stanley, how are you? Stanley says, I think there's needs to be a lot more education to buyers. Otherwise, they will refuse. NAR should be responsible for spreading the word. They should have spread that word long ago, long ago. You go into Starbucks and you ask 10 millennials what a buyer broker agent is. They don't know. They don't know. I used to have people like, oh, I'm going to help you. Oh, do I have to pay you? There's a lack. I think you're spot on. Again, as an agent, you need to educate your buyers why you're important, why you have value. I believe it will, or I believe it will extend to the end of the closing contract. But again, we definitely need to see, what comes out of it. All right, let's see a couple more. Nope, unfortunately, Alyssa, we are not able to put that in there. That is not going to work. So that would be a problem. So basically, it's the lesser of what the buyer is paying, or what the seller is offering. I believe here's when you would get paid by the buyer is when the seller is offering no compensation. If they're offering no compensation, you are going to get the lesser amount. Now, again, everything is negotiable now, right? Before, like we could negotiate, before the offer, right? We couldn't put anything in the offer about our commission if we're the buyer's agent. That's all going away. That's all going away. So you might say, hey, if I bring you a buyer with an acceptable offer, are you willing to pay me 2.5%? Right? Feel empowered. All right, a couple more. I think we've got some repeats in here. I mean, you can rebate it, Vivian, but in essence, you don't really need to because that's all you're going to get anyways. If it's less than 3%, you're going to get the lesser amount. No, I don't believe you're going to be able to do that. I don't believe you're going to be able to do that. So again, what you're doing is you are negotiating with the seller to get an amount paid to you that you believe acceptable to you and your buyer. So again, if they're only paying 1%, then, maybe that isn't the property. I don't, since Dalton Wade is like a transaction fee brokerage, so that doesn't really apply to us here. But I mean, again, whatever the commission is, if you are in a brokerage that does have a split, you're just going to be splitting a lesser amount. Yeah, absolutely. You can set a percent, a dollar amount. There's, many ways, many ways to document that. Let's see here, take a few more. A lesser amount will be paid by the seller. Yep, that's exactly right, Alicia. Yep, yep. The seller, let's see. Maggie, how are you? How often can you change the buyer's agreement? As often as you want. I mean, as often as you want. If you get both parties to agree, you and them, we're fine. Absolutely. You can adjust the amounts. No issue there. All right, two more questions and then we will call it a night. Alicia says, thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. Uh, if we get the buyer for our own listing, do we get a buyer broker agreement? That's a good question. I don't believe you're going to need that. I will double check on that, Tony. But again, the sellers, it's already determined, like through the listing agreement, right? If the listing agreement says, hey, you're getting 5%, 2.5, 2.5, right? And you bring the buyer yourself, you're going to get 5%. If you wrote something maybe in the additional terms that said, if I procure the buyer, I will only charge you 4% or 3.5%, then you're going to get, 4, 3.5%. Thank you, Mark, for putting that article in there on the VA. Why? It's a good question. Why wouldn't the buyers just call the listing agent to show them the home that they saw on Zillow or Realtor.com? Well, here's why, because there, again, this is the lack of education, unfortunately, that we're going to have to deal with. If you're a buyer, like the listing agent works for the seller, right? Now, again, I mentioned previously, yeah, you're a transaction broker, you're supposed to be neutral. That's not in practice usually what happens. That buyer is then unrepresented. Unrepresented. That's what you have to communicate, right? You have to communicate that you're a great negotiator, right? Do you think, I mean, again, do you want somebody negotiating for you as a buyer that's aligned with the seller? I don't know. I mean, I mean, buyers already have that choice. Probably 95% of the transactions are co-broked. Cheryl asked, good question, Cheryl. When lender is notified that buyers agree to pay 2% commission, will lender have to qualify the buyer with a 2% debt to their buyer's agent? I don't know the answer to that. I would tend to think not. Again, maybe we use that seller's concession to get compensated through that. All right, one last question. Let's see. Hey, Maria, will buyers have access to, I mean, they have access to the listing agents now. So yeah, I mean, of course they will. Of course they will. Again, we have to see, what's going to happen. I don't know, again, I think the message to the buyers is that they're at their own peril. They're at their own peril when they're working with a listing agent. And I only say that from personal experience where I've seen, maybe I've come in, and gotten a listing and I'm like, how much did you pay? And I was shocked. And then they told me they work directly with the listing agent. The listing agent isn't going to run comps and, negotiate for them and, say, hey, you don't want to offer this much. That house isn't worth that. Those are the things you got to be telling them. And it's true. It's not like we're lying or making this up. Trust me. I mean, now that I know what I know in real estate, I would not want to be a buyer just working with a listing agent. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to them financially. But again, unfortunately, I think as Stanley said, NAR, they haven't done a great job educating the public. Lorianne says, I'm having lender Carlos Ramos post all the info now regarding commission. There you go, right? So, I mean, again, all this may come out, right? I mean, all that data, all that information on what sellers, that may all pop up. Hey, Shirley, as an enabler for new and first-time home buyers, are there talks about lenders being willing to pay for the buyers? Yep, I mean, they can really, I mean, the change with VA today was pretty huge. So, I mean, that was prohibited before. Again, I think the seller's concession, right? You can't specifically say it relates to, paying the buyer's agent commission, but they can use that, right? They can use that credit to pay the commission. Just can't specifically state that. Hey, Debbie, how are you? All right. Will we be able to encourage our sellers to? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, like if you believe that that's helpful, I do. I mean, you've heard that over and over. Of course. Of course. What does the broker need to see? A copy of the buyer agreements? Here's how I'm going to police this. Hey, Winnie, basically, when you submit the offer, right, there needs to be that buyer broker agreement. That's got to be there. Am I going to be checking every time you show? Like, it's impossible. It's impossible to enforce. But right, MLS could say, okay, when did this? Show me when this got signed. I don't know. Absolutely. Absolutely, Darren. You can write that in. You can do that 100%. Couldn't do that before, but I anticipated again, there'll be more clarity on that, putting it in the offer, right? We were told it had to be before the offer. We had to negotiate that before. I believe that that'll be allowed. Then, right, then the next step is getting something that documents we are going to be paid that either from the seller commission agreement or from the listing brokerage. But absolutely, it's all about negotiating. It's going to be fun. It's going to be better. Hey, Shauna. So, I think at this point, the biggest concern is how to best serve our sellers when we are on the list side, since sometimes a buyer commission offer will be published, but just extra dollars on top of what's been previously negotiated or agreed to, or I'm misunderstanding. It is our buyer contract plus what the seller is paying or a max amount between both. So again, let's talk about the listing agreement. So the listing agreement is going to say you are going to let's not use that variable rate where you're going to get less if you find a buyer. Let's keep it simple, right? You're 5%, right? If you find a buyer, you get 5%, right? If you don't find the buyer, you're offering a buyer's agent 2.5%. No change, right? Take it to the next step. You're working with a buyer, right? You call up, you say, hey, what are you offering? We're offering 2.5%. You sign that buyer broker agreement, right? And they agreed to pay you 3%. You're going to get 2.5%. You're going to get the lesser amount. That's how it works. All right. If we get seller's concession towards the buyer's closing costs, how can we add our commission in the mix? Again, so it's again, the buyer's agent, excuse me, the buyer would have to tell the title company, here's how I want to allocate my closing cost commission, right? My closing, not commission, but my closing cost fee, right? The credit, right? I want this much to go towards my agent's commission and this much towards, prepaid insurance. Hey, John. Um, yeah, absolutely. Because I'm gonna, if, as I mentioned, I'll mention this again. So the way the buyer broker agreement is written now, like you can't sue anybody because you can't really collect because the cost of collecting is more than the commission. But what we're gonna do, if the forms don't come out this way, I'm gonna make my own form and add one little provision that basically says if the losing party, if we do have to go to litigation, pays the other party's attorney's fees. All right, everyone. I'm pretty tired. I've talked a lot. More to come. So really, as soon as the forms come out, which I'm hoping is in the next 3 to 4 weeks, they'll be soon. I've been, you know, continually asking, when we need those, because then I think we'll really, just have a better understanding. As I've said a few times, we're operating a little bit not in the dark. We kind of know, but we don't really know because we don't have the forms. Maybe, like John asked, maybe there's a provision that talks about, um, what happens if we have to, litigate. Maybe it'll be like it is now, left silent. All right, everyone. I appreciate your time, spending a couple good hours here. Again, be out there, start using that buyer broker agreement. If you're not, start talking to your clients about it. Again, in many places, it's a given. Like they just don't take clients out without one. You want to begin to do that. You want to begin to use that buyer broker presentation, right? In order to really communicate your value. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone being here. Have a great night. We'll have the recording up on the website no later than Thursday, and we'll go from there. All right, everyone. Enjoy your evening. Thank you so much. Good night.